everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make music like Lane 8. As usual, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and yeah, let's dive in. So, the first thing I have here is this lead, which sounds like this. And so, it's a pretty straightforward sound. Basically, as far as the MIDI goes, I'm just playing this thing like E major, that's kind of what key this is in. Just kind of jumps around. It's sort of like playing around an E major 7 chord. Like if I get these, you can kind of see we have E, and then we have the major third, which is G sharp, and then we have these notes, like D sharp, and yeah, so it's kind of just playing around the like E, and then the major third, and then that major 7th, and then there's some extra notes up top, of course. But those are mostly just notes that are within the chord anyway, like that G sharp, for example. So yeah, so as far as the synth sound goes, it's pretty straightforward as well. I used operator, and I have this FM algorithm going, so it's not actually doing any FM, it's just playing these two oscillators side by side. And on the first oscillator, we have a saw wave. On the second one, we have a saw wave as well. You can see they have pretty similar envelopes, that's just kind of shaping the volume. And then I put the first one down to 0.5 and the second one up to 2, so that's kind of how you get that, like, contrast between sort of like what you hear as like lows and highs in the sound, like not like lows in the sense of like a sub bass or anything like that, but lows in like you can just kind of hear, like you can clearly hear that it's two oscillators playing at once, if that makes any sense. And then I have that going into a low pass filter, which has a bit of an envelope on it. And yeah, so this is a pretty common pluck that I've heard in a lot of Lane 8 tracks. So I wanted to show you how to make it. But yeah, after that, I just have a bit of an echo here. It's just set like this, so we don't have these synced. And that's what gives it that almost kind of like reverby feel because it's so quick. I have the feedback set like that and the dry wet set there, so it's pretty wet, but it's not like taking over the sound. And then after that, I just have it sidechained to the kick, and then I have this little EQ8 just cutting out some low end because this sound is made with saw waves, and so is the bass. And so I didn't want them to clash, whereas you can hear if I turn off the EQ8. You can hear that lead is like fighting a little bit to get in the range of where the bass is. So yeah, so that was just the purpose of that. So then after that, we have this little lead, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty simple sound. It's just kind of in there to add some extra sort of like spice to the beat. Like the thing about Lane 8's tracks is he's very good at stuff like this, like little extra melodic elements that kind of like I said, just add a little extra layer on top. Like without that, this would be a little bit more boring. And especially like this note, it just kind of adds some nice sort of like I said, it just complements the track pretty well. So the way that I made this sound was, it's just actually a square wave going into a low pass filter. Low pass filter has an envelope and it's shaped like that, so that's why it's like a pluck. And then I have that going into a reverb, and that's how you get the reverb on the sound. And then I just have it sidechained to the kick. So pretty much everything, like all the synths are sidechained to the kick here. It's pretty much like a standard procedure for this type of stuff. So the next sound I have is the bass, which sounds like this. This is a pretty straightforward bass sound. All it is just a saw wave going into a low pass filter, and then that's going into a sidechain. And yeah, like the key to these kind of basses and like the basses in Lane 8 tracks in general is they're pretty simple sounds usually, like synth-wise. Like something like this is perfectly fine and would totally work. It's got, you know, like some higher harmonic content because obviously a saw wave is gonna have that, but then the low pass filter cuts that back a bit, and we just get that nice kind of like deep, buzzy bass. And then as far as the notes go, I will say also, like, you have to get kind of creative with it, because you can see I went a little bit simple here, just going from E to C sharp, but these notes up high that it kind of like jumps to are what gives it a little bit more like interesting kind of feel. You know, without those, it would just be like, and that wouldn't be very interesting. So yeah, so then the next thing we have here is this little percussive sound, which I'm going to play with the kick so you can kind of hear the groove. And there's a little fill at the end. So this is just a little like tom sound or something. Here's the original sample. And yeah, I just put that in a simpler, and we're just kind of, playing around with it, playing like some 16th notes. And the key with this thing is I'm trying to add some groove. Like with a lot of house, like tech house and stuff, where you have a more percussive bass line, you would have like, something percussive that would be helping with the groove, but would also be in the low end. But because in this track we have a bass like this, I still want something to occupy that, like, not quite the low end, but like the low mids kind of area. So that's the purpose of this. It just adds that groove. And if you listen to all the drums with it, and then without it, here's with it, and then without it, it's definitely a lot cooler with it. So yeah, I just have that on there, and then I cut out some low end. I was trying to keep it really clean because the thing is, Lane H's tracks are like extremely clean, like his mixes and just the way he sets them up, like nothing really clashes with anything else. It's not gonna like get in the way of anything. He just has very clean mixes in that sense. He really knows how to put everything in its right place. So I want to do that here. So then the next sound we have is this kick. And yeah, this is pretty straightforward. I don't have any processing on it. I didn't really need it. It's kind of just about leveling it out and getting that all right. But one thing I will say about the kick is it's more about like the type of kick you choose. Like because you have these like longer bass lines that just sort of hold out typically in this style of music, you have to be very careful with your kick because obviously those two have to sound good together. So that was kind of what I was going for here. That's why I used, like, this kick isn't really the type of kick I would usually use, but it sounded really good under that saw wave. Like, it provided a nice contrast in the low end to that. So that was the purpose of that. And then the next thing we have are these two hi-hats, and I'm actually going to show these to you together. So they sound like this. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's just like this one, and then this open hi-hat. And so they're pretty straightforward. You kind of can imagine the purpose. The open hi-hat is more like keeping the beat. And then just like with this thing, I just added this hi-hat just to sort of accentuate the groove a little bit. I feel like it, again, it like just sort of makes it a little bit groovier, and it just adds something that was missing. So the next thing we have is like this clap / snare, which sounds like this. Oops. So this is 2 layers. It's this clap, and then the snare. So you can hear the snare is kind of like the main part, and then the clap is just sort of adding that little click at the start of the sound. You can see it starts a little bit before the snare as well. So it's kind of, just adding like that cool little click at the start. Now, one thing I did notice is that in Lane 8's music, he tends to use a lot of snares, which is kind of not what people are doing with house music. Like, typically, especially now, like, obviously claps are a lot more popular, and you could kind of just use a clap in this style. Like, if I turn off the snare, it would work, but the snare does add a nice punch. The thing about what a snare does is it's mostly, like, in the lower mids, like, as far as what you're really hearing, like, the impact of it. It's around this area. And so, because of that, it adds like a nice kind of punch to the 2 and the 4 when you do have it. So I think that's kind of why Lane 8 likes to use them. Like I said, it just kind of makes the beat hit a little bit harder. And like something else I will say is Lane 8's sound, I would kind of describe it as like progressive house with sort of like deep house, like sort of informed by deep house. And this is something that's definitely done quite a bit in progressive house and trance and stuff like that, is using a snare like that, which you wouldn't necessarily use in like a lot of house now, but in that style, it's very popular. So I think he draws a bit of influence from there as well. And then the last thing I have here is just this little shaker loop. It's just playing in the background. I feel like it helps with the flow. And also, we don't actually have a lot of elements in like the high end. Like if you listen to this, and I'll show you, I'll put a spectrum on the master. So you can see, like, right there at the very high highs, it's kind of like missing some stuff. But if we add this shaker, you see it kind of adds a little bit to that range. So it's a nice element, it's just something extra on top of everything that adds that, like, crisp kind of, like, sizzle to the track. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Check out my social media. It's on the screen right now. You can also get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And thank you again, everybody. I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.